Developer Chucklefish recently dropped a major surprise sequel announcement for the cult classic indie tactics darling Wargroove. And they followed it up with a terrific demo which just dropped this past week during PAX East. With the original game coming out back in 2019 and free DLC release in 2020, Chucklefish has been really quiet on the series up until now. And they even brought reinforcements this time, as Robotality, who is the developer for turn-based tactics RPGs called Halfway and Pathway, is lending a hand to develop the sequel. Even more interesting is this announcement comes on the heels of the Advance Wars reboot camp finally getting a new release date. There's even been a new Advance Wars-like game on Kickstarter called Warside 2, which looks pretty interesting in its own right. Wow, what an exciting time for turn-based tactics fans. While we don't have an official release date for Wargroove 2 just yet, the devs confirmed it is coming later this year, so it will be really interesting to see it go head-to-head with the game it was inspired by. For what it's worth, I think this is the one you should be following way more closely. Fans of the original know how big of a deal a sequel announcement is, so if you're new to the series, let me get you up to speed on what made the original Wargroove so special, even for someone who may not have a lot of tactics or strategy game experience, which was the case for me. Or, if you're already a fan of the original, we will also get into the new features we know of that will be in the sequel that we should be really hyped for, and I'll even cover some demo impressions. Spoiler alert, it was a blast, so let's just get into it. So what is Wargroove, and why should you be excited for it? Quite simply, the original Wargroove was a spiritual successor to the Advance Wars series, and it's just a really well-made game. And after the sequel announcement, it's been on the deepest sale it's ever seen, so you're going to want to see what this game has to offer and get your wallet ready. And that's because, to me, Wargroove ended up being an absolute masterclass in indie gaming design with an impressive level of content variety and replayability. But before we get further into the mechanics and features of Wargroove, I want to quickly introduce anyone new to the channel. I'm an indie gaming content creator who primarily focuses on covering some of the most exciting upcoming games of all shapes and sizes in a series I call In Development. I've previously covered the JRPG style Sea of Stars, classic Donkey Kong Country style platformer Windswept, and a few other unique games worth checking out. If this sounds like something you're into, be sure to subscribe to keep up to date on some of the best indie games coming soon. Okay, no more shameless plugging, back to the video. Let's get into the details of the variety of content Wargroove has to offer. We have the main campaign, the puzzle challenges, and the arcade-style battles for each commander, which is interesting enough. We also have the online PvP battles, which is, well, a little rough nowadays as the game is 4 years old, but it used to be pretty active. But best of all, this game has a total game changer that makes it truly amazing. A full-scale map and campaign maker. We'll get into that feature a bit more later on, but first let's go over the overall gameplay and start with the campaign, as it's what most players have come to experience or will experience. In true tactics style gameplay, each battle has you face off an enemy army using your troops, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. All set on a grid-based map which is very reminiscent of Fire Emblem. The game features a full-blown codex which gives you info on unit cost, movement, damage output for strengths and weaknesses. It's a bit overwhelming at first, but you pick it up very quickly. Capture these villages, which will earn gold every turn. Capture barracks to spend gold and deploy more troops. And complete the objective, which could be to destroy the enemy stronghold or commander, get these villagers to safety, or escape the map yourself. A unit with less health will also do less damage to enemies, so you'll want to protect and consider healing certain units, or sacrificing them in favor of keeping another unit's health high. Your commander is a very strong and versatile unit with their own special power called a groove. These vary from Mercia's healing aura, to Emeric's Elder Shield, which increases defense in a set area, or Caesar's ability to inspire his troops to get another turn just by being a good boy. With that said, it's an automatic loss if you lose your commander, so it's a big risk to move them towards being more aggressive. But you are encouraged to use them due to the fact that you need to attack or be attacked to charge your groove. A lot of strategy comes into play with this. While the troop types available between you and your enemy are consistent for a balanced fight, the art design of each are truly unique with a complete reskin rather than a simple recolor. It's a nice touch that makes the different armies really stand out. The commanders have a lot of personality too.
An educated choice.
I'm Nuru.
Sage always wins.
This will be fun.
Lightning blast!
Fight me!
Okay, maybe too much personality.
Oops.
What?
I really like the voice acting in this game, but it's very limited, with each character only having a few sound bites that gets old pretty quickly.
Wow. Yeah.
Except for you. I can never be mad at you, Caesar. Oftentimes, the missions start off by having you feel really overwhelmed by the sheer size and defenses of the army you're facing. Over time, with sound strategy, you will begin to believe you are starting to gain the upper hand. Of course, the enemy may then deploy a golem or a dragon, and then the panic starts to set in again. This really creates these incredibly tense moments, as one costly mistake can place you in a situation you can't come back from. And some of these battles take up a lot of time. More often than not, it can take over an hour if you tend to overthink things like myself. The fear of losing footing in the match and losing time spent made each fight feel very engaging. If this sounds a little too stressful and you're new to tactics or strategy-based games, then the devs have added a great accessibility feature for you. With a slider-based difficulty option, you can fine-tune the game to give you the right level of challenge you want by allowing you to adjust damage received, income, and groove charge. Similarly, if you want to give yourself more of a challenge, you can go ahead and go to the extreme opposite. The game's default difficulty is the hard option, so it can feel pretty challenging for newcomers to tactics games, so this is great to have. I found some missions quite tough on the hard difficulty, so turning it down to medium when I needed to was a really nice option. Now the game does give you a ranking based on how many turns it takes you to complete a map, and adjusting the difficulty slider to make the game easier than the medium level does limit your ranking. The higher the ranking, the more stars you can get for up to 3 stars per level, and stars are used for a couple of unlockables, but it's not really a big deal. Varying objectives and unique maps which may introduce a heavier reliance on naval or air-based units really keeps the campaign feeling fresh throughout. I never really lost interest at any point during the campaign. It felt like it was a good length where it doesn't overstay its welcome, but it still has a lot of meat to it. There's even a few maps that introduce this fog of war element, which I thought was a great addition that really isn't utilized nearly enough. It leads to more strategy, more opportunities to take risks, and you encounter a few more surprises. The campaign features a simple but interesting story that unfolds through these short and sweet cutscenes and with a few character interactions during your missions. The game has an incredible amount of charm to it in the writing, character designs, mission layouts, and world map. Besides the campaign, there's these puzzle missions. This is a mode where you have to work out the right combination of moves to take out this commander in one turn, as one example. A lot of it has to do with determining how to maximize your movement and sacrificing units in the right order to whittle down a target's health. I found these really hard, but maybe that says a little bit more about me than anything else. More people found this to be crazy hard, right? The arcade mode allows you to go through 5 encounters with each commander, and it has its own unique mini-story for each of them. It's just okay. It adds some lore for each of the commanders as you complete it for them, but otherwise it feels like it's just here for more content. And it feels a bit tedious for anyone who really wants to complete the game. Turn-based PvP with up to 4 players via online play or locally is also here. Experts of tactics games may find that the single-player campaign will eventually start to feel too easy and repetitive, so they'll welcome the challenge of other players. Again, it's hard to find a match online right now, but there are some really competitive players on here that will surely love to see an active community coming back for the sequel. Now, back to what I think is easily the most interesting feature that makes this game very memorable. Don't get me wrong, all of this was great stuff up until now, but it's the map maker that is truly a special addition to this game. It's simultaneously simple to use and pretty deep. It has a really great and clean UI to help you through it. You can upload to share online or download other players' maps for your own use. You can even create your own single-player campaigns, complete with customizable cutscenes. There's been a lot of really incredible campaigns made by the community, some intending to be a pseudo retelling of Advance Wars or Fire Emblem games, and just overall there's just a lot of interesting and lengthy campaigns out there. Whether you want to be creative and make your own balanced PvP map, or if you just want to dive deep into another player's campaign, you're in for a real treat. I wish more games did a map maker like this, it just really stands out as a feature right now. On top of this, the game had a free DLC which easily added another 20 hours or so of content with its own campaign featuring a new faction and story. It also introduced a co-op mode which looks set to reappear in the sequel. Long after the game's release, it had multiple balance patches to fix some builds which were a bit broken, so I would expect the same level of care will be put into the sequel. There's just so much to like about this game, and if it clicks with you, you could very well spend over 100 hours in it. And even if you don't quite get to that point, playing through the main campaign alone is a really fun experience with a lot of variety in objectives and level design. Okay, now with that crash course on the original out of the way, let's get to the sequel. So how does Chucklefish follow up a game which already offered us so much? While we have limited info from the announcement trailer and the website, we at least got a chance to try out the new roguelike mode with the public demo released during PAX East. So let's get into what we know so far. We have a new character revealed in Nadia, who is featured heavily in the trailer as a new commander for the Outlaws. And a few other commanders have been hinted at already with these silhouettes on the game's website. Story-wise, we know this game takes place 3 years after the first. The main campaign has now been broken up into 3 separate campaigns, with each being interwoven into one complete story. We could only assume each campaign will cover a separate faction or set of factions. And hopefully this leads to some flexibility for the player if they allow us the freedom to choose when to jump into another campaign when you want to take a break from the one you started on. They sort of toyed around with this idea in the past with the DLC for the original Wargroove. There you had 3 key objectives split into separate paths, allowing you to play them in any order you wanted, or move on to a different mission when stuck. The groove system has been reworked into more of a tiered system. In the demo, we saw this implemented as allowing you to charge your groove all the way to 200% for a stronger attack. Whether it will go any further than that in the full game, it's hard to say at this point. 5 new unit types will be introduced, and we've seen most of them between the trailer and the demo. You have the air troopers, the frogs, the riverboat, and the kraken. And they also have just really terrific designs to them. Adding a few new units doesn't immediately sound like a game changer, but in a tactics game like this, a few additional units further expands on the strengths and weaknesses of all units and means new ways to strategize. A new roguelike mode called Conquest has been introduced and was the only mode available for the short-term demo release during PAX East. After playing through a couple of runs, I have some mixed feelings on it. There's some good and bad here, so let's break it down. And quick disclaimer, this is a demo, so it's clearly a bare bones and work in progress version of it, so it's a given that the devs will flesh it out more in time for the game's release. You start each run by selecting your army by choosing between 3 randomly generated teams. Now if you lose any of these units, they're gone for good, and you maintain the same health throughout unless you get an opportunity to heal, so keeping your commander healthy is critical. Each point on the map select screen provides you with some details on size of the map, if there's an opportunity to recruit units, or if it contains an item. Speaking of items, this is a really cool idea. You can find these equipable items in some maps that your unit keeps as long as they stay alive, and it could increase your critical damage output at high health, increase attack damage but also lower defenses, or ignore movement penalty of certain obstacles. There's these other points on the map that can lead you to a special item or an opportunity to recruit a character. All in all, there's a lot of interesting ideas in here that makes me want to see more of it. Okay, now for the things that didn't quite work out as well. For one, the Shrouded maps or Fog of War maps just do not feel fair whatsoever in this mode. It becomes a complete RNG nightmare where enemies will most likely get the drop on you, and there's not much room for strategy to save you. And speaking of RNG, it does feel like ultimately your success in the demo version of this mode is very luck dependent. I know RNG is a factor in a lot of roguelikes, but it seemed like there's a heavier need for certain things to really need to go your way than I would have liked. Like this blessing, for example, which can completely heal your party, which is most likely the one you will want. Unless you want to get a movement buff to a unit you don't even have. Sure, I guess I could end up getting that unit later, but again, that would require some luck. Oftentimes, if I made it past this mini-boss, I would have such a depleted team that the final boss encounter was literally impossible. I know there was some room for improvement in my skill level for this mode, but still, it seems quite a bit unfair. The mode also feels pretty short, but I'm assuming this is just a demo thing. It's hard to say if this was intended to just be, say, a floor 1 in a multi-level dungeon, or if it'll stay one floor and they plan to add a lot more paths and battles in between the start and the boss. It'd be cool to see some more unique objectives thrown in to keep things interesting too. This next one is a minor complaint, but I kinda wish you had a small area before starting the fight to be able to position your troops where you wanted to for another small layer of strategy. Despite these negatives, I still think the dev team has the framework for a great feature, but it just needs a lot of fine-tuning to get to where it needs to go. A roguelike is hard to get right and balance between luck and skill. It's the mode I'm most looking forward to, but also still the most concerned about. Since it is a roguelike, it doesn't seem like you get any permanent buffs to keep, but it is implied that there will be things to work towards or a goal per se to keep you motivated to keep coming back. We'll have to wait and see how they do that exactly. Another feature that isn't really getting talked about is night mode. There's just a lone image and simple mention of it by name, but we don't know if it's just an aesthetic thing or if it actually bears some similarity to the Shrouded maps. At this point, we can only speculate. Most of the original game's features are also here. You still have the map, campaign, and cutscene maker, with Chucklefish promising it to be an improvement over its predecessor. Online or local multiplayer is back too, allowing for competitive or co-op play among 4 players. How far this game goes in making it feel different and an overall improvement from the original is still to be determined, but what we have so far is really promising. And it's hard to ignore that more Wargroove is hardly a bad thing. Okay, if you made it this far, I'm assuming you were interested in the game, and if that's the case, then check out the description where I dropped a link for the sequel. Or if you want to pick up the first one, I have a link to the Steam page there too. The original Wargroove has recently been on sale for its lowest price ever, so it's the perfect time to check it out if you're new to the series. If you pick it up or wishlist the second game, let me know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe for more content like this, and check out another video. Here are the last 2 games I've covered, and they look amazing. Check it out. Thanks, and take care.